Okay. Uh, this is Prophet Raul, and I would be signing on, and we're doing our Black History Nugget. I haven't been on like I wanted to with this on the case more frequently than I have been, but I'm continuing the reading that is on ChristianityToday.com, where they have an interesting article I found very interesting about slaves and their religious experiences. So, without further ado, we're going to get right into it. The reason why I'm reading these slave narratives is so that we will be able to make some parallels between what I'm reading and the historical accounts and what is actually happening to us today. Shalom, everyone. What's going on, CG? Good to have you. So I'm going to begin. If you subscribe to their website, I'm not trying to get you to subscribe, but if you do subscribe, you'll be able to read the whole article in its entirety. Okay, and I'm reading the heading for the next section: Boisterous Baptisms. Accompanied by songs, shouting, ecstatic behavior, baptism, especially for Baptists, was perhaps the most dramatic ritual in the slave's religious life. The biggest meeting house crowds was when they had baptizing, said one slave, George. They dam up the creek on Sunday, and as it would be deep enough on Sunday, at them baptism, there was all sorts of shouting, and they would sing, "Roll, Jordan, roll, the living waters, and Lord, I sees coming home." Dressed in white robes and attended by the brothers and sisters, the candidates proceeded amidst singing and praises to the local pond or creek, symbol of the river Jordan, where, according to Baptist practice, each was ducked by the preacher. Sometimes the newly regenerated came up from the baptism water shouting for joy at being made new in the Lord. You know, as I read this, it makes me wonder, when are our people are going to come up new as a nation? It's one thing to get baptized and, you know, it's just your personal experience, but it's a whole thing to be baptized when your whole nation comes up free from their enemies, free from sin, free from your animus against the Most High. Recollecting the baptism of his mother, Isaiah Jeffries has left a description which conveys something of the excitement and scene of new beginnings, which baptism brought to many slaves. When I be a big boy, my ma got religion at the camp meeting at El Bethel. She shouted and sung for days. She all over the plantation and the neighboring ones, inviting her friends to come to see her baptism and shouting and praying for them. She went around and all the people that she had done wrong and begged their forgiveness. She sent for them that had wronged her and told them that she was born again and a new woman and that she would forgive them. She wanted everybody that was not saved to get up, and with her, my mom took me with her to her baptism. And I was so happy that I sang and shouted with her. All the niggers joined in singing. The next title is called Slave Preachers. As I read this portion that's called Slave Preachers, I want you all to make parallels with today, just like in the last section, baptism. You want to make contemporary parallels, build contemporary bridges to our ancestors who were slaves. And I would dare say you would see that not much has changed. Presiding over slave baptism, funerals, and weddings was the slave preacher, leader of the slaves, religious life, and influential figure in the slave community. If that's not a parallel, I don't know what is. White daddy presides over everything we do. Funerals, baptisms, weddings, everything we do. White daddy got his hand in it. The slave master. I told you much hasn't changed. Religious life and influential figure in the slave community, usually illiterate, the slave preacher often had native wit and an unusual eloquence. Carefully watched and viewed with suspicion, the preacher had to straddle the conflict between the demands of conscience and the order of the masters. Anderson Edwards reflected on the difficulty he experienced as a slave preacher in Texas. I've been preaching the gospel and farming since slavery time. When I started preaching, I couldn't read or write and had to preach what Master told me. And he say, tell them niggas, if in them boys, the Master, they goes to heaven. But if I know there's something better for them, but dare not tell them, kept on the slide. Y'all heard that? When I started preaching, I couldn't read or write and had to preach what Massa told me. And he say, tell them niggas, if the boys, if they obeys the Master, they goes to heaven. Yeah, that's the same thing the Christian church teaches us today. And I say Hebrew Israelites too. We really do have this mindset. I know I do. And I hate it. And I'm getting rid of it bit by bit. Let me read that again. When I started preaching, I couldn't read or write and had to preach what Master told me. And he say, tell them niggas, if they obeys the Master, they goes to heaven. But I know there's something better for them. But dare not tell them. Kept on the slide. Wow. The black preacher during slavery, he said, I know it's something better for us, but I dare not tell him. Don't think that that's not happening today. Don't think that you got all these pastors with PhDs and doctorate of divinity degrees and all this stuff, and none of them know that we the Israelites and been knowing it. Hebrew Israelites and Christians are doing the same thing that was going on the plantation. After all, we still on the plantation. It's called the United States of America. That I done lots. I tell them, if and they keeps praying, the Lord will set them free. So that's how he couched it. He didn't say everything that the Master said, but he didn't tell them all the stuff that he was hiding from him. And y'all think Hebrew Israelite camps ain't doing no better? Please. There's so much shucking and jiving going on among Hebrew Israelites. It probably put Christians to shame. By comparison with other slaves, some preachers were privileged characters. One former slave of Alabama marked the nigger preacher in them times was mighty free as long as he didn't interfere with other slaves' work. He, the slave preacher, was allowed to hold services whenever he wished, and frequently he traveled to neighboring places to conduct prayer meetings. It was from the preacher, this relatively mobile and privileged slave, that the rest first heard of the Civil War. During the war, he offered whispered prayers for the success of the Union Army. You see what I'm talking about? The slave preacher had to secretly pray that the Union Army would win. Not that the Union Army was fighting for them anyway, but they couldn't hold prayer meetings in the South praying that the Union Army could get free. That's signing your death warrant. So what I'm showing you here is that their prayers were even hindered because they were slaves. They couldn't even pray the way they want to pray. They couldn't have the type of personal relationship that they needed to have because they were slaves. Are you willing to die to have the relationship that you need to have with the Most High? What a wonderful preacher these blacks are, exclaimed one correspondent of Georgia in the editorial of American Missionary. I listened to a remarkable sermon or talk a few evenings since. The preacher spoke of the need of atonement for sin. Bullocks couldn't do it. Heifers couldn't do it. The blood of doves couldn't do it. But up in heaven, for thousands and thousands of years, the Son was saying to the Father, put up a soul, prepare me a body, and I will go and meet justice on Calvary's brow. He was so dramatic in describing the crucifixion. He said, I see the sun when she turned herself black. I see the stars falling from the sky. And them old Herods coming out of their graves and going about the city, and they knew 'twas the glory of the Lord. Were the slave preachers a force, accommodation to the status quo, or a force for the exercise of slave autonomy? On the one hand, the slave preacher was criticized by former slaves as the mouthpiece of master. On the other hand, some slave preachers preached and spoke of freedom in secret. There was a time in American history where slaves had to speak about the word freedom in secret. Wow. The land of the free. See, that freedom wasn't for us. Slaves had to whisper and sneak about and talk about freedom. A lot of black people don't get this kind of thinking. They don't get it. Whenever I see a black person singing the national anthem, I shake my head. I don't care how well they cut it up. I'm like, wow. It's just amazing. When that song was written, we were slaves. And we love the national anthem. Nobody likes the national anthem like black folk, because we know how to jazz stuff up. And they use us to mesmerize us about something they wrote about them. The weight of slaves' testimony suggests that the slaves knew and understood the restrictions under which the slave preacher labored. That resonates with me. Sometimes I think myself going too hard on the Christian preacher, but they really kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. They really are. But it's not worthy of sacrificing the whole nation. So, these are some things that you have to juggle. These little slave preachers we got today, they between and betwixt, just like the ones that was on the plantation. So we're gonna have to have some mercy, y'all. some grace, some wisdom in dealing with this situation we're in. Hebrew Israelites too. I look at them and I go back and forth sometimes. For a black man and a slave to stand and preach with eloquence, skill, and wisdom was in itself a sign of ability and talent which slavery's restrictiveness couldn't frustrate, but never completely stifled. Okay, that's all I'm going to read tonight. But that's enough. I don't want to flood you all with too much stuff. But the next stuff that we're going to read is on spirituals. Spirituals. And so let me get over to the YouTube channel so I can see who's in the room or what's being said. Brother, I found out through Christ, I was different from the nations. I just got tired of white folks lying, saying they love God, but act and treat us like beasts. I haven't been the same since. Well, good. Good, brother. You're not supposed to be the same. And let me say this, Black History Month is really for white people to coddle black people. That's all it is, y'all. Black history is really not for us. Our history is everything that's in history. That's what it is, y'all. And let me say this. Every now and one thing we're going to have to do in this captivity, just like slaves had to do in their captivity, we're going to have to manage our rage. We're going to have to manage our rage and temper our rage with wisdom. You see? That's one of my big pet peeves with Hebrew Israelites. They like the rage monster. But, and I know when you start learning this kind of stuff, you start getting angry, and rightly so, but you got to temper it with wisdom. I'm not saying all the time take a passive a stance, but it's going to have to be tempered with wisdom, because these people are our enemies. They are our enemies. And they've proven that. So go. I didn't want to keep you all long. And I'm kind of tired today. I think I'm going to sleep good tonight. Hopefully. But anyway, you all take it easy. This is Prophet Robert Wadawabi signing out and saying shalom. Give me a thumbs up if you appreciated this effort. Like, subscribe, and share. Shalom. Subscribe to